Okay, so I'm delighted to be joined by Cathal, Cregg and Colm Boyle to preview this weekend's All-Ireland preliminary quarter-final weekend. Lads, how are you keeping?
All's good now. Thank you.
Yeah, good, Dara. Thanks, million.
I suppose it's fair to say this championship has been a slow burner, if you want to call it. There's been shadow boxing has been the word used to describe it, all those kind of words, but I suppose now we're really at the stage where, it means something. It's knockout weekend. It's been a long time coming. I suppose the draw as well, people probably didn't even realize we might have got these games this weekend. Colm, from a Mayo perspective, is it more of a shock? Is it more of a shock probably for Mayo to be in this situation? Galway probably always knew that there was a possibility they could be playing it this weekend with the group they got. But I suppose Mayo, having went down to Kerry even that first weekend, it was almost assumed that they'd probably go on top the group. The winner of that game would top the group. For Mayo to end up now going to Salt Hill, even they're not even have a home game, it's surely a big shock to the system.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Since that Saturday evening in Salt Hill, there's no doubt. I'd say even the manager were planning on playing every 2 weeks up until the quarterfinal. So now that's obviously gone out the window. The reality is they haven't played well enough since the Kerry game to earn the right to get to a quarterfinal. So they've had to go this route. Against Louth, it was very, very, very patchy. Cork, the same. And then obviously whatever happened there with 15, 20 minutes to go, they were 6 up. They let that lead slip, and they'll be kicking themselves because not only are you going into a prelim game, but going into a prelim game against Galway in Salt Hill, it's going to be a very big ask. But in a strange way too, and Carl, I don't know what you think about this. It's probably an ideal game just to refocus the mind, because you obviously don't have you almost don't have time to think about what happened in Cork and the Gaelic grounds. You just have to get over it, move on, and full focus now on Salt Hill. And look, for us, it should be a cracking game to watch. In fairness, for the players, it'll be an absolute nightmare, because the Galway boys as well, they had 1 foot. They almost had the hard work done as well. They had 1 foot in the quarterfinal as well, so they were planning on going a different route. So there's no way on Sunday morning either set of players thought this was even possible, I'd say. But here we are.
Yeah, but both teams Sunday morning, I was full sure the two of them were nailed on to be top. I couldn't believe it, especially Mayo. I think it'll be a real kick in the teeth of them to one, have lost that game, but to have ended up third as well, and then the draw probably couldn't have gone any worse for them, really, to get Galway. I'd say all the 3 seeds were trying to avoid Galway realistically. So, but as Colm said, it's probably a good game for them as well, because a local rivalry, there'll be very little in it.
Yeah, I suppose from the Roscommon perspective as well, I suppose, you look at that, realistically, Roscommon probably, at the start of the group, they probably expected to be in this round. Now, when you look back at the Dublin game, it's probably one you left behind, regarding that, probably Dublin were there for the taking. I suppose, from the Roscommon's perspective, although they would have been disappointed last weekend, in a weird way, and now I'm not just, this Cork, this is going to be a big 50-50 game, but in a weird way, probably the draw isn't as bad as it probably could have been.
No, it definitely could have been worse. If you had to go up to Salt Hill, it'd be a far worse game. I think all the 3 seeds were just trying to avoid them, and there probably wouldn't be a whole pile of difference between Donegal and Cork away. Long journeys, 2 tough teams. But I think everyone just wanted to stay clear of Galway. That's the reality of it. And yeah, I think Roscommon probably would have expected to maybe come through after that first game, would have probably expected to come through in maybe second place in the group, the way they were going. The first game wasn't a bad result at all. I suppose with 10 minutes to go, as well as they'd played, it looked like they were going to lose it and take out nothing out of it. But it was good for Roscommon to get a point and hold their own, and come back into that game. So I suppose with next week's game as well, they had a consistent enough performance against Kildare, but didn't play well on the day at all, I would say. So they'll have plenty to improve on if they want to get a result in Cork.
Yeah, Colm, I mean, I suppose going into this weekend, would it be an argument to say that Mayo, probably confidence-wise, are the most shot going into this weekend? Yes, Galway, the likes of Galway, Roscommon, Monaghan lost, but you look at Galway and Roscommon, they lost with last-minute freeze. They were in the game. They didn't really, collapse or anything. Mayo, 6 points up, and let's be honest, probably in the back of their heads, whether they'll probably like to admit it or not, they were thinking quarterfinal, the job's done here when Tommy Conroy put that ball in the net.
Yeah,
But then,
well,
whether it wasn't injury time, 20 minutes without score, like it's a big, it's a big ask to come back 7 days later after something like that.
Yeah, well, you mentioned there, actually, I think this is the only game the weekend where both teams are coming in on the back of a loss, but I think always loss was slightly different than Mayo's. Like you mentioned, the way the game finished, and I'd say they're still scratching their heads wondering how that happened, why it happened, to be in that position. It looked like, for all the talk about Cork's defence and how good they were, but Mayo still had a 6-point lead built up, which was exactly what they would have spoken about all week, being patient. The chances will open up. We'll eventually find the gaps. And when we do, take our chances. And that's what they had done up until the 56th minute. It wasn't pretty by any means, but they seemed like they'd worn down the Cork defence. And to let a lead slip, and not only let the lead slip, but not really seem like they could stem the tide that was coming against them. It would just seem to be wave after wave of Cork attack. Every time we got the ball, we seemed to turn it over. And in fairness to Cork, they sensed that this is on now. They didn't just get level with Mayo or a point or two behind and lose the game. Then it was only one winner really when the game got level. It looked like Cork had all the running in them. I'd say it was just a psychological thing. They just were bursting with energy. They felt the game was there to be won. And from a Mayo point of view, like, it would have been very disappointing that there was just no response to that, and a 9-point swing at this level with 20 minutes to go is, it's almost unforgivable. But again, I come back to my original point that I said, the fact that it is now Galway and you get that news the following morning, it almost doesn't give you a chance to really digest it and be frustrated about it too long, because you just simply don't have time. You just got to move on.
Yeah, and I think probably I suppose one thing for Mayo that they'll really be questioning is, it wasn't a Dublin or a Kerry that done that to them and turned them over. Like Cork are probably middle of Division 2 at best. They were just about made it into the All-Ireland series. Like, there was a question mark for a while whether they'd be in the Tailteann Cup or not, and for a team like that to turn over Mayo, who won the league, one of the top teams, they'll have big question marks over themselves. And I suppose you won't know till the weekend, till it comes, if they get back into that position again, and can they react to it differently, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, before going into this weekend's games, just kind of a reflection on the whole group stage. I said slow burner at the start. It probably was. Like, we had two, boring enough first weekends. There wasn't really a lot of good games you could look at. Now, last Sunday, I have to say, even I was in Tullamore, even leaving and even reacting in the car, listening to, Mayo throwing that away, the drama, Westmeath were a kick of the ball away from knocking Tyrone out in that Armagh-Galway game. I suppose, is there an argument to say that this sort of system, although 3 teams going through, is still probably a bit much? Is it an argument just to stick with it for another year or two anyways, just to let it breathe and give it a chance?
Yeah, I think so. Look, there's a huge amount of games on between this and the Tailteann Cup. Like, the only problem really is getting enough time to watch them all at the weekends. I've enjoyed them. And last Sunday, I wasn't actually in Tullamore. We had a family christening, so I was watching at home and I was following all the games. And like, I couldn't believe it when I was looking, obviously following the Mayo game on an app, and they were way up. And next thing I presumed they'd won it, and next thing they were down, and they'd gone from first to third. And that was the same when the Galway Armagh game was going on. So I thought it was great. Excitement to it, and look, at this weekend they'll play out. Hopefully there'll be a couple of really good games, and then you're probably guaranteed really good games to the quarterfinal. So I think they should let it roll through for the year and next year and see. I'd be all for it. The more games the better.
I still don't know about it. I'm kind of the other way. I'm looking at it from the players' point of view, and because at the end of the day, they're the boys doing the slog and the grind all year. Cork, say the last day, they started the day 3rd in the group to beat Mayo. To jump Mayo on the table. They're obviously assuming Kerry are going to beat Louth. To jump Mayo on the table, they had to beat Mayo by 3 points, which is a big ask at the start of the day, and that's exactly what they did. But I don't think the reward for doing that is big enough. Just the fact that they get home at the end of the day, they're the same round as Mayo are this weekend. Granted, they get home advantage. It might seem on paper like they have a nicer draw, but I don't know, does that really matter these days? And to be honest, I'd say Roscommon are happy enough going to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, because Cregg, I don't know if you ever played there. I only played there once, but that was in the old stadium. Like, that's a good opportunity for Roscommon. You're happy enough you're going to play to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, because you might only get one opportunity in your career. You play every other second weekend in the High Park. So, and I'd say the same for Kildare. Like, that last minute free that they win, or sorry, the mark Kevin Feely, the reward for that for me should be Kildare should be going to a quarterfinal, and Roscommon should be out of the championship, the same as Mayo should be out of the championship, So I'd be nearly thinking it's very hard for players to, like, I'd say Roscommon coming down the last day from Tullamore, or where was that game? It was in Tullamore, was it? Yeah. I'd say Roscommon players come down, of course you'd be pissed off for a while, but you're not going to be too put out about losing that game. You're just looking forward to the draw on Monday morning. That's finishing third. I just think it should be first and second, because you're getting a double punishment. You have to play a game the following week, and then you're on the bounce 3 weeks in a row going into quarterfinal. So you are at a disadvantage coming into a quarterfinal, I think. So yeah, but we're going to see how it play. We're not going to be complaining this weekend, because let's be honest, we should have 4, I'd say cracking games.
Yeah, and actually one of the players was interviewed after the game the other day and said, we're not too bothered. We knew we were in a pre-quarter final anyways, realistically. And it just means that it's away now instead of at home. And another point you made there at the start, Colm, from a player's point of view, I think the schedule, although for me it's okay looking on now, or us looking on now, it's a tough schedule for lads. Like, I'd say if you're with a good county and a fairly good club team, by the time October time comes, you'll be damn glad of a break if the body hasn't broken down already.
Yeah, is that probably even the biggest issue, the scheduling at the moment? I mean, like, the All-Ireland's finished on the 30th of July, and I know I'm not going to go into this big split season debate all over again. It's been done. But, like, surely there's a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks in August there that could be used just to even give it that extra few weeks. You have provincial championship starts. I mean, the Mayo-Galway at the league final, and the next week, the championship started. Like, there was not even time to even just ease into it. You get the reasoning behind the split season, but realistically, it only helps the counties that get to the All-Ireland final maybe run their club championships a bit better. For instance, the Roscommon club final is always on in October regardless. So it's not really this split season even helping too much. Surely there's a couple of weeks that could be used there in August.
Yeah, you made a good point there. I don't think every county is really in sync with the club so far. They seem to be starting at different times regardless. I know the Mayo Club Championship is down to start on, I think it's the 12th of August or something like that, regardless of how Mayo do for the rest of the championship. But I think every county should be the same. You set your date, but I think definitely even the county finals could be pulled in a couple of weeks, because it just seems to run far too late into the year in that regards. But we're not going to solve this one, unfortunately, lads. It's gone on a while. But even the fact that there is these extra games this weekend, it's just another weekend of games for teams. And like, the chances of teams getting through 3 weekends in a row without picking up a couple of knocks, a couple of injuries. We saw Galway with Sean Kelly last weekend. Like, it's a big ask for squads, and it's really going to test them out. As you said there, Darragh, it's probably the teams with the bigger squads. It's definitely going to benefit, you think?
Yeah, you're looking at a team making a quarter final between FBD, National League, Connacht Championship, and now the All Ireland. You're looking at least 15 competitive games during the league, and that's not even probably getting past before you get to a quarter final. So it's a huge volume of games.
Yeah, so we'll go on to this weekend's games. I suppose you have to start in Salt Hill, Galway, Mayo. Is it an argument to make that, I suppose, Galway are slight favourites, but it really comes down to the injuries column? I mean, Damien Comer didn't play against Armagh. Sean Kelly went off with an injury right at the death. Even the likes of Dylan McHugh, the half backline, didn't play the last day, and you've seen that he was a big player alongside Kieran Malloy in that half backline the last day. Like, are those 2 or 3 players really the key in terms of swaying us towards Galway's favour even?
Oh, hugely, yeah. Like you mentioned, the boys at the back there, I think 3 of their starting 6 defenders in the All-Ireland final last year weren't playing against Armagh, and you could really tell that effect. Kelly's obviously the huge one. I was at the Galway Armagh game, and he didn't look good. I was surprised that he wasn't pulled off earlier than he was. He was left on for about 3 or 4 minutes, but it was clear that he wasn't able to walk. He was just hobbling along. So I assumed at that stage that we wouldn't see him this weekend. I was listening to Barry Cullen yesterday on the Mayo Football podcast, and he seemed to think that the word is that he has a chance. So yeah, so let's wait and see. But he is such a huge player for Galway. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, Comer and McHugh you mentioned there as well. The word is they got picked up a couple of nicks last Thursday night in training, so maybe the 10 days has given them a chance to get fit. But for Galway, I think the big thing, their defence. I was looking at their defence the last day, and certainly their full back line, and it does look to me like it's an area, even if they get over Mayo on Sunday, that teams might target. Johnny McGrath's in his first year in championship. I think there's no doubt he will be a good player. The surprising thing for me the last day was Keane Hearn, who played full back. Again, I think he's in his first year of championship. From what I've seen of him, he's been a halfback. He went straight into full back to Mark Andrew Murn, and I thought that was a really big ask of a player like that. Even physically, Murn was just all over him, and I thought he struggled hugely with them. So I'd say if it is him going in on Aidan O'Shea on Sunday, I'd say Kevin McStay would be happy enough with that matchup. And just Jack Glynn, I don't think it's hit the form of last year just yet as well. I think even from a stature and physical point of view, them three boys together, they could be targeted by, if Mayo don't do it, I think maybe a Dublin or Kerry down the line might expose that. But Galway, look, they were probably always going to lose a game, in this championship. It's very hard to go through the way this format is without losing a game. So Power Joyce be hoping to have that out of the way against Armagh. They weren't brilliant by any stage. They probably haven't been brilliant through the whole group format when you really go through it and dissect the games against Tyrone and Westmeath, but they were getting the wins. The injuries are the big thing. It's a 50-50 game anyway. Like, these games, Mayo and Galway, there's never anything between them. So it's only going to be the small things that swings them. And if there are a couple of injuries on the Galway side, it might make Mayo slight favourites, but there's nothing in it.
Yeah, Cathal, I mean, Damien Comer, even in the height that day against Roscommon, he was the man who was the difference that day. Not, pretty much he was the difference. 1-3, 1-4 from play. Is he at the moment even more important than Shane Walsh, who isn't probably firing at the moment for Galway? Is there an argument to say that Comer is just that bit more important in terms of the whole Galway structure?
Yeah, he was brilliant at the end of the height. Like, his performance, he was the difference, as you say. And I think he makes the rest of them tick. The rest of them don't seem to be playing as well when he's not in there. Look at what last year Walsh was flying it, and he just hasn't got to that level yet. Like, and to be fair to Walsh, he had such a long year last year, then went on the club run and straight back into the championship. Like, it's nearly an impossibility to keep that, especially the level that he was at for both Galway last year, towards the end of last year, and the performances he put in with Kilmacud as well. So I would cut him some slack on that, but they probably do need him to start firing fairly soon. Because particularly if Comer is out. Now, I suppose the only thing with them is on different days, like, Tierney has played well, Cook has played well, Ian Burke has played well, and if Comer is in there in the mix, like, they have a serious variety of, I suppose, Burke, small, knacky, Tierney and Cook, big rangy players, and Comer with his physicality. So I suppose for me, I just think there's just more question marks over Mayo for the weekend than there are over Galway. Colm mentioned it there. Like, they probably were going to lose a game at some stage, and it was just about that they lost the game the weekend. Like, that was a dubious enough free that Armagh got at the weekend.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I thought, like, look, at your man done well to win the free, but there was no way it was a free. So we could be easily saying that they drew the game or won the game. So for me, that just puts them a small bit ahead of Mayo.
There's no doubt, Carl, like the six boys you mentioned there up front, like, if they click, Mayo aren't bothered, because defensively Mayo don't look too solid at the minute. I think the thing about it is we've been waiting probably for the Galway forward line to click now for a while. Even going back to last year, it was kind of Walsh play well one day, Comer do it the next day, and they've kind of almost been rotating it ever since. So if the day comes, and I hope it's not on Sunday, but if the day comes where they all click together, Burke, Tierney and Cook thrown in the mix as well, like, they could, they put up 120, 220 on most teams, you know what I mean? But it hasn't come yet, so hopefully we won't see it Sunday.
Yeah, and one other key player for them as well that he's coming into a bit of form, probably more so in the first half, the last day, is McDade.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he was a huge player for them last year. He just looked so powerful the last day. I didn't see the whole lot of the game, but the bits I did see, he's so powerful running, just as that natural athleticism and power, and he's a game changer for them as well.
Yeah, Colm, I suppose is the problem for Mayo as well that their full back line is probably one of their more inexperienced lines. Now, I know they've had a Division 1 campaign, and Killarney, and even the Roscommon game, although they lost, there was a big championship game. Have they the players to deal with your Shane Walshes, your Comers, even Rob Finnerty and a few of those players? If they click, as we were mentioning there, Ian Burks, like they are. Galway probably up front have those maybe more X factor players that the Mayo have at the moment.
Yeah, well, there's going to be questions asked them, definitely, for sure. If you're going through matchups and what would you think, like pound for pound, if Comer's in there, you'd be expecting David McBreen physically to pick him up. He's been a player who's really been dogged by injuries the last couple of years, and hence didn't make his championship debut till this year. But if he can stay fit, he will be a long-term kind of fullback for Mayo, and I think he's just going to improve year after year after year. So physically, that'll be a really good matchup. They match up in the first round of the league in Castlebar and had a really, really good battle. It was interesting, actually, in the league final, McBreen went off at halftime injured, and Comer comes on at halftime for Galway, so they didn't actually get to match up in the league final. Sam Callan was a young player. He hasn't started the last two games. He picked up Sean O'Shea. I don't know has he picked up an injury. Sorry, he did start against Louth. He picked up Sean O'Shea in the group stage in the first game and did a huge job on him. So he picked up Walsh in the league final. So it'll be interesting to see, does he come in and pick up Walsh? He's just extremely athletic, extremely powerful, very quick along the ground. So I think he's probably an ideal matchup for Walsh, and I probably expect him to come in as well. And he just adds a bit more pace to that Mayo backline as well, which has probably been lacking over the last couple of weeks. But there's no doubt about it. There is a bit of inexperience there, and it was kind of been lauded after the Kerry game how well they did. I think there was 3 or 4 boys in that backline, including I think Donald McHugh was there as well. 3 or 4 boys that were making their championship debut, and they were brilliant against Kerry. But since that, you've just seen maybe that lack of experience, especially when the games have been going against them. I think that's the big thing. We talked about the Cork game. They just weren't able to stem that tide and come under that pressure, which is very, very difficult to deal with when you're on the pitch and in the moment at the time. So, yeah, we're hoping we can do that a bit better. But just on McDade there, I've been thinking about him because in the first half the last day against Armagh, there was literally no one marking him. It was quite incredible. He just seemed to have the run of the place, and they brought on Jarly Burns about 5 or 10 minutes into the second half, and he just completely went man to man and took him out of the game. And I think Mayo might do something, might put Paddy Durkin on him right from the off, just tag him from the start. Do not let him run, because as Carl mentioned there, he's such a attacking threat coming from deep for Galway. So if you're Mayo, you have to be looking at taking him out of the game.
Yeah, Cathal, from the Mayo point of view, I mean, who are the players you were looking at? We mentioned the Galway players there, the likes of McDade, Comers, Tierney's. Is it the likes of Aidan O'Shea? Is this where, I suppose, we know he's played for years, but maybe just at the latter end of the championship, he just hasn't had the performances maybe to back up a good season. Are these the kind of games now that he probably, he needs to step up and be counted for in this kind of new role he's played this year as well?
Yeah, I suppose, look, at Hayden always gets a lot of spotlight, but I think there's a lot of them that probably, particularly on Sunday, that have to come with big performances, like around the middle. Matthew Ryan has played well in a number of games, but they need himself and O'Connor to have massive games at the weekend. And realistically, up front, I heard Killian played in a game the weekend and scored a good bit. He was held back last weekend, which I suppose doesn't really make sense given they didn't score a lot. And if he was good enough to go out and score a high score in a club game, you'd imagine he was good enough to at least be on the bench last weekend. So realistically, they'll need the midfield, Ryan O'Donoghue, Conroy and Killian O'Connor, along with Aidan O'Shea, all hitting the high note next weekend, because Galway are going to set up defensively. They always set up defensively. And I suppose the big question mark over Mayo is whether they're going to be able to break that down or not. I suppose they struggled against Roscommon. They played really well against Kerry, but it's no coincidence that Kerry didn't set up anyways defensively that day, which still, I'm kind of still baffled as to how they set up, because they didn't even set up with a sweeper that day. And they struggled again in Cork the last day against a defensive type of team. So I think along with Aidan, obviously Aidan gets the publicity, good or bad, but I think the rest of them lads up front and in the middle will have to have huge games the next day.
Yeah, Colm, I mean, maybe looking back, like, was leaving Cillian O'Connor out of the squad, now you might say it was good just get him minutes in the legs, but was that even just an element of complacency for the management? Possibly, just not even having him on the bench. Surely he was probably good to go for at least 10 or 15 minutes. I know club league game or whatever he played is completely different to inter-county football, but there was surely 10 or 15 minutes if needed, really.
Look, I'm sure the boys are regretting it. I don't think there's any doubt about it that having him, even physically, if you're on that pitch and you see Cillian coming in with 15 minutes to go, it probably just gives the rest of the lads a boost, if nothing else. So, look, he probably should have been in the 26, playing a club league game. From someone who's playing these games at the minute, they're not being played on a huge intensity or anything like that. So, you know what I mean? Playing 15 minutes in the Gaelic grounds and probably a couple of sets of runs after it, he probably would have got more out of that from a physical hit and just felt like feeling himself like he was back, in an inter-county environment and back at full tilt. It's going to be very different very different for him going into Salthill obviously next Sunday and coming off the bench with 20 minutes to go like you'd expect. But look, someone said to me, if you were in the Cork dressing room when you were told that Cillian O'Connor played a club league game the night before, what kind of message that sent to the Cork boys? And Cregg, you probably have these things thrown at you in dressing rooms. The last thing you hear before you go out, it might be something that the other team said during the week, or you heard about the other team. It's the last message you get, and maybe the Cork boys heard that going out the door, and it was just the final little bit of thing they needed to get the bit between their teeth. But do these things matter at the end of the day? It's very hard to know, but there's absolutely no doubt he'll be in the 26th bar. Please God, he hasn't picked up an injury this week. He will be there in Salthill for Sunday for sure. You can be guaranteed. And what a boost it will be to see him coming in with 20 minutes to go.
Yeah, Carl, is even from Mayo, is it worried that maybe their scores from play this year hasn't been, maybe since the league hasn't been too hectic, that they have been relying on frees from the likes of, Ryan O'Donoghue, even winning frees up front. We saw in the Roscommon game now, after the game, I suppose from the Mayo side, they were a bit angry at the referee. Maybe a few frees weren't given, but you saw even in the league final as well, it was frees that they relied on. Jordan Flynn the last day came up with 4 points. You'd have to imagine again, the likes of him, even Paddy Durkin and a few of them have to come up probably 2 or 3 because their forwards up front aren't probably firing from play.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose a lot of that is down to probably the point I made there a while ago in terms of the teams. I suppose since the league, there was a lot of open, free football played, and Mayo were flying it at the time. But they've definitely struggled in that department since the start of the championship. As we know, Roscommon set up ultra defensive against them. Louth did, and so did Cork. And they've struggled to get many scores. I don't know, have they got 12, 13 scores in most of them games? They put up obviously a big score against Kerry, but again, as I mentioned earlier, Kerry didn't have any real defensive system in play. And if you let that Mayo team, kick the ball back to them and let them counter attack on you, you won't stop them, because they're such powerful runners. They've had that for 10 years since Colm's time. But the forwards just since the league and their forward play during the league seemed to be really good, and they seem to have really improved it. But whatever has happened, whether it's that teams have copped on to what they're doing, or whether it's just a lot more defensively set up, they've definitely struggled since the championship in that department.
Colm, I mean, even just touching on the fact this game isn't even sold out yet. Now, I don't know, is it Pearse Stadium 25,000? Is that a reflection on football at the moment? That this game, knockout football to get into a quarter-final, Galway Mayo, you would imagine probably in years gone by, this game should be attracting that at least.
Yeah, well, I suppose the thing about it is, Darragh, it's such a short turnaround. It's a week, to get your tickets. I think the word is it's over 20 so far, which is generally good. I wasn't even sure if they get there. Yeah. I was in Carrick-on-Shannon, like I said, last Sunday, and for a game that was meant to be moved to Croke Park, Carrick-on-Shannon was only 3/4 full. I think it was 6,800 was the official attendance that was announced out of 9. So, but there's been that common theme really throughout the championship, throughout the crowds. But I think really from now on, you'll probably see the crowd start to come to the games, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, with even home advantage, but Would it count for much for Galway this weekend? I mean, you could even see Mayo probably outnumbering Galway in terms of supporters. I know the Galway hurlers are playing Saturday as well, which isn't ideal. But does it count for a whole pile in this sort of game?
I don't know, does it? I'd be interested what Cathal thinks. I don't think it makes a huge pile of difference when teams are so evenly matched. Home advantage, crowd on their side, doesn't matter. I think throughout the group stages of the 16 games where there was home and away games, there was 6 wins at home, 7 away, and 3 draws. So that kind of shows you there's nothing really in it. It doesn't really make a huge pile of difference, and especially where teams are so even matched. Like, we could be talking about this game next week, and we could be literally talking about a free that Shane Walsh had to level the game or to win it, or a free that Killian O'Connor or Ryan O'Donoghue had to win it or bring it to extra time. Like, that's really how close this game is going to be. So home advantage, I don't think this would make any difference. That's why Aidan O'Shea is free to win or to bring the game back to 2 the last day. I don't think that even mattered.
Yeah, and I'd say Mayo's record in Salt Hill has actually been quite good.
Yeah,
I'd say
it's not bad, yeah.
5 or 6 years. Actually, the 3 Connacht teams, Roscommon, Mayo and Galway, I'd say their record against each other away from home is far better than it is at home. Roscommon bet Mayo and McHale the last twice. Mayo bet Roscommon in the Hyde. The same Roscommon and Sligo and Galway and Mayo, as I said. So home advantage doesn't seem to, between the 3 of them, doesn't seem to make any difference. It's a hindrance.
Definitely for Mayo it is, anyway.
On to predictions, anyways. Colm, since you're invested interest in this, we'll start with yourself.
Oh yeah, well, I'm not saying Galway, lads. It's Mayo all day in this one.
I think I'm going to have to go with Galway. I just think if there's anyone at Colm or Walsh or Kelly playing, I just think Galway would be more consistent throughout the year. For me, over the last, if you asked me maybe a month, 5 weeks ago after the Kerry game, I'd be, it'd be more 50-50. But since that, there's probably just too many question marks around where Mayo are going.
Yeah, I suppose on to Saturday's action, starting with Cork-Roscommon, 2 o'clock on Saturday. Like we mentioned earlier, like Roscommon will be disappointed, Cathal, with the way they lost, maybe with the performance. Lots of players probably individually didn't really perform to their capabilities on Sunday. There was very few that you could say were at the top of their game. Maybe the likes of Enda Smith could say he was on form on last Sunday. I suppose mentally preparing for a game like this off the back of a loss after a season that's been kind of plain sailing pretty much for Roscommon. Although I know they lost to Galway, but they had them 5 or 6 weeks to recover. They've 6-day turnaround here, long trip down to Cork, a Cork team with momentum. I suppose, how do you think they'll be approaching this one, even from a psychological point of view?
I think they'll be kicking themselves because I think they went in a small bit complacent last weekend. They had enough chances to win that game and they were just a small bit sloppy. And realistically, only for Kildare got the 2 black cards in the first half. I think Kildare would have won it by a bit more. To be honest, I don't think it would have came down to that Kevin Feely's one. Roscommon were down by 4 or 5 points, got it back to, they were 2 up at half time and looked like they were back in the game. But then in the second half, they just, they created chances and just kind of uncharacteristic, dropping balls, wides, that type of thing. And I suppose that would probably indicate just maybe not mentally fully tuned for the game. So I think they're, it'd be different if they got hammered or something, but they were really in that game right up until the very end. And I think there'll be a bit of a bounce back in them from it. And it's a very winnable game. I suppose, if you take it that it's a tough trip down and the distance, and they probably have to go down the day before and all that type of stuff. But I think they'll be well up for a game, and they will. It's a great opportunity to get to a quarterfinal.
Yeah, I suppose you would have been in the dressing rooms as well over the years. Like this, it kind of feels like a big moment for this team, just to, I suppose, at least stay like we're a mainstay in the top 8. For Roscommon to lose, you won't necessarily forget the good work done earlier in the year, but I suppose it'll be fresh in the mind, like the Clare game last year. Really, that was a missed opportunity, and a few games in years gone by. Like, it does feel like a big moment for this team in general on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. Because I suppose, look at the team has been in and out of Division 1 and stayed in it this year. They've won a couple of Connacht titles over the last few years. But I suppose the big goal was probably getting to a quarterfinal, getting through a quarterfinal, which hasn't been done, in recent times. So I think they will be disappointed as a group if they don't get to at least a quarterfinal, and depending on who they play, if they're very competitive or win it. Like, I think for them to really say that they've made progress, they probably need to get through a quarterfinal, or put in a really good performance against the Kerry or Dublin, not going up to a quarterfinal and going out with a whimper. Like, so I think this is a huge game the weekend. Like, it'd end up being after it being a good year, I suppose. It started off realistically. Roscommon were favourites to go down in Division 1. Stayed up in Division 1. Good win against Mayo. Have made it to the pre-quarter final now with a bad performance last weekend. If they were followed up with another bad performance, it would leave a bad taste for the year.
Yeah, Colm, I mean, it feels like probably a big moment for Cork as well in a way that they've put in, after a disappointing Clare loss in the championship, a good away win against Louth, a good performance against Kerry. They were there or thereabouts towards the end, and coming back against Mayo, like, this feels like a moment for Cork football as well to kick on, and I suppose just gain a bit of pride, maybe attract a bit more support back into Cork football, because the last 10 years have been pretty forgettable from a Cork point of view in footballing terms.
Yeah, exactly. And, you mentioned there that the type of county really the GAA needs to be going well, and it would be good to see the Cork footballers back and competing again for All-Irelands. I think this is a game, like, both teams would have been happy with the draw, which is kind of unusual. I think both teams will really fancy their chances. Obviously, Cork having home advantage, but I mentioned earlier on, I don't think the Roscommon lads will be too bothered by going down to Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Like, it's an unbelievable pitch, big open pitch. It'll probably suit the Roscommon forwards of Anton as well. The one worry you might have for Cork is Brian Hurley went off injured the last day in the second half. Rory Dean went off. It looked like a bit of concussion. You don't know, will he be right? So Stephen Sherlock may have to start for them, and that kind of takes away their impact sub that they've got from him from the last two games. There's probably a bit of an argument to be made that Cork might be actually the form team coming into this, recent form team coming into this anyway. If they bet Louth, put up a really good display against Kerry. They were probably the team really closing in that game and trying to win it at the end. And obviously they were the far better team against Mayo in the closing stages as well. Why Roscommon, just that really good performance against Dublin first day out, but the performances, even against Sligo, took them probably 50-55 minutes to put Sligo away. The last day against Kildare, very, very patchy in performance. So possibly it's Cork that are coming into this in a bit of form. But I think you're right. Both teams will look at this now as an absolute huge opportunity. I think Colm makes a great point. If Roscommon didn't win this game, it'd kind of nearly undo some of the good work that Davy Burke has done all year, because to finish third in Division 1, beat Mayo in the championship, draw with Dublin up in Croke Park, and still not get to a quarter-final. They'll probably be disappointed with that. Certainly in the championship, they'd be disappointed with the way that the championship finishes up. So it's a huge, huge game. It's so hard to call, though. This one could literally go either way.
Yeah, and I think it's nearly like a free shot for Cork. Like, if they beat a Mayo, then beat a Roscommon, end up in a quarter final, who knows where they'd end up. But even at that, it'd be a really good year for them then, because look, realistically, no one would have expected that to happen, given I said earlier they were very close to finishing up in the Tailteann Cup.
Yeah, Carl, you would have played obviously under Anthony Cunningham, the previous manager. What have you noticed any real difference in, I suppose, from watching from the outset? Davy Burke and the new management team. Is there anything that you see that is, I suppose, different from management teams gone past?
I suppose the biggest thing is they have got even more defensively solid, I would say. And obviously the possession games. None of the games that Roscommon have played, like, it's not, none of them are really, really good games to watch. Do you know what I mean? But they're staying in every game, and every game throughout the league and the championship so far, they've been really, really competitive in, regardless if they've won or lost it. So I suppose for entertainment value, it's probably not. It's not massive, to be honest, in most games, but they're consistent in their performances, and I suppose, bar the Sligo game, the one worry I'd have is they're not putting up big scores. They're around the 13, 14, 15 the last day. They put a bigger score up against Sligo, but maybe would have expected that. But I suppose the longer they go into the championship against the better teams, I'm not sure they'll score enough to be winning them. Even against Mayo, I think it was 2-8 they got that day.
2-8 to 10, I think it was.
10 scores would hardly ever win a championship game. But they are keeping every other team tight that aren't scoring a lot either. So and they're all in sync. They're definitely in sync with the game plan that he's trying to implement.
Yeah,
I think the big thing.
Probably on, yeah.
Sorry, that big thing from Cathal there on the games Roscommon have won. Really, they've got themselves out in front good and early, like against Dublin, against Mayo, and it allows them then to play that possession game that they like to do and put numbers behind the ball, and you kind of have to come out and chase them, which they seem to like. So I think that's a big thing for them on Saturday, if they can actually get out and get in front of Cork rather than having to chase Cork from the off.
Yeah, is there probably like an argument that Kieran Mercer was probably getting a few of the headlines, earlier, but consistency wise, Enda Smith has probably been, if you look across the championship, probably top 5 players in the championship, along with the likes of McGuigan and Cliffords and that. Like, even from playing against Roscommon for Mayo, like realistically, if Roscommon play well, it's Enda Smith has played well. He's that important to Roscommon.
Oh, hugely, yeah. You mentioned Kieran Mercer there. He was super. His form probably has dipped a tiny bit, but Smith has just seemed like he's getting, stronger with every game. And even against Mayo, the first round of the championship, and what was a horrible day in McHale Park in first week or two of February, I think he came out midfield and he just really dragged Roscommon, to victory. He was absolutely superb. And that's probably something you wouldn't have associated something within a whole pile through the years. So it's normally he's a brilliant player, but normally he plays well on better days or better pitches, drier sod, where he can move and use his athletic ability. But he just looks like, even physically, like he's a different man. Some of the scores he's kicking, like that score he kicked towards the end of the game the last day, like that's a David Clifford score. It's an outrageous type score. So like anytime we would have played them during the years, he would have been the first fella, if we're playing Roscommon, one of the first guys you talk about, obviously. And usually it was the likes of a Lee Keegan or a Paddy Durkin or someone like that, who'd you be kind of going matching up with him and hoping that they take him out of the game. And you probably, well, certainly in our time when we were playing Roscommon, you felt if you could nullify him, you'd probably go a long way of winning the game, So yeah, but he's one of the foreign players in the country, absolutely. But they're going to need him now on Saturday, absolutely. They're going to need him again.
Yeah, look at his performances in the championship have been brilliant. Maybe he was probably quietish in the kind of final, but the Mayo game and the 3 group games, he's been brilliant. Like I think he got 5 points from play the last day, 5 points the day before, and like the teams are tagging him as well. And he's playing predominantly right around the middle and getting 5 points from play. That's a phenomenal return. Like.
Yeah, predictions for this one, Cathal. We'll start with you. I suppose you're going to side with your own county, I hope.
Yeah, I think Roscommon will, just for the simple fact they've been more consistent all year. They've been playing at a higher level throughout the year, and like if Cork pull out a performance like they did last weekend, it'll be very 50-50 game. But you just can't be sure with Cork whether they'll do that or not. And I suppose that's why I'll be going Roscommon.
Colm, yourself?
Yeah, I might have to upset you here, lads. Might have to go with Cork this one. The only thing that's telling me Cork might win this is that they might, like I go back to my earlier point, they might actually be the team coming into a bit of a form. Like that performance against Kerry wasn't a flash in the pan. They were very, very good. Again, they were very, very good against Mayo. Home advantage. I think they'll nearly see this as their time of getting Cork back on the big stage. And if they can rise to the occasion, then they might actually, do enough to win the game. Hurley missing, if he is missing, will be a big blow for them, though, because like I said, they will have to start Sherlock, and that takes away his impact from off the bench. But I'm just going to slightly go with Cork on the fact that they'll be looking to get themselves back in. They'll see themselves as an opportunity now of rising to the challenge and getting back to the big time.
Yeah, moving on to the second game on Saturday, Kildare Monaghan, 4:45 on Saturday. Again, I suppose Kildare coming in with a bit of momentum, incredibly. There was even talk that they'd get through on 1 point, and it made a bit of a farce of the competition. I mean, they ended up finishing second. Colm, I suppose the Kevin Feely and Daniel Flynn factor, realistically, they are the two, over the years, the two players with, I suppose, the bit of class that Kildare would look to. The two of them are really serious players on a given day, and I suppose they really they stood up and were counted for, and they really probably were the difference on last Sunday.
Our two brilliant players, and Feely, like in fairness, come back from, I think he snapped his Achilles tendon last year. Huge injury to get back from that, and Flynn is capable of doing anything on any given day. He's a nightmare to mark because half the time he doesn't know what he's going to do himself. So it just makes him so unpredictable, and he's so powerful. So yeah, the thing about Kildare is, when's the last time they put in a back-to-back performance? To be put really two big games together. So that's going to be the big question mark going into them. They're the one team that don't get the reward of a home game. I think they're playing in Tullamore again this weekend. So it's a very hard one to know. It's such a tight one, but you have to be feeling Kildare, probably similar to Cork, are probably putting themselves in together this week and saying, they've been so inconsistent for so long now. We need to put two performances back to back. And if they do put in a performance, they'll feel like they have a very good chance. I just feel like Monaghan, even though they were disappointing last Saturday evening against Donegal, might have a bit too much for them. But no more than the other three games. It's very, very tight.
Yeah, Cathal, I suppose for the Kildare management, like this probably feels even another big game for them. They've had questions all year. Even Davy Burke has come up in Kildare because he went for the job a few times and was turned away, and they would have been looking what he's done in Roscommon. So for the likes of Glenn Ryan and Johnny Doyle and Anthony Rainbow, all those involved, like it's probably it's a big moment for them in terms of their management reign over Kildare.
Yeah, big time, because like realistically they've had a disappointing year. Like they're probably a bit like Cork that we mentioned previously. They're just there's more in them, and they're better than a middle of the road Division 2 team, but they're just inconsistent. But on their day when they play well, they can rattle or beat most teams. So, but like Colm's point there, I just wouldn't have faith in them to back up and put in another performance next weekend. I think Monaghan will be disappointed from the way they played last weekend, the performance they put in. I'd have more I suppose faith in them to bounce back and really dig in and put in a big performance and win the game at the weekend.
Colm, I mean, are Monaghan improving? Like they seem just a bit, not really too many standout performances for them this year. That good second half against Tyrone where they came back, and a good performance against Derry has to be said as well to draw that game. But have they really improved or come on this year?
It's very difficult to know. Obviously, like if you go back to the league, they stay up on the last day. First round of the championship, then they beat Tyrone. But again, how good are Tyrone? We still don't know. And then they go into I can't remember who bet them those championship after that actually. But
Derry hammered them, I think.
Derry hammered them. They played Derry again in the group format. And in fairness, Derry were very flat after coming off the Ulster final. Granted, Monaghan were an awful lot better than they were the first day out. So it's very, very, very difficult to know actually how good this Monaghan team are. But they are dangerous. There's no doubt about it. What they do have is they've scorers from everywhere. You know what I mean? I know Jack McCarron chipped in with 9 against Clare, but they kicked 123 that day. They do have a lot of boys who just pop up and kick 1-2 points here and there, and that all adds up to the scoreboard at the end of the day. That performance against Donegal last Saturday night, like it lacked any real bite or an intensity. Like Donegal, and we'll get to them in a minute, they kicked some unbelievable scores, but there was never really a case where Monaghan were putting them under any savage pressure. Certainly in the first half, they upped a bit in the second half. So I think there's more improvement in Monaghan's performance last Saturday evening than there is in Kildare's performance against Roscommon. I don't know, can they go much higher than that? I think there might be a bit more in Monaghan, but again, it's very, very hard to know. They're kind of two teams who are very unpredictable, and you don't know what you're going to get from them from any given day. But I think maybe Monaghan might have a bit too much for them.
Yeah, Cathal, are you probably expecting an open game here? Because Kildare realistically probably usually like to play open football, and they'll probably fancy themselves against maybe a Monaghan team. But Kildare probably like all the games, both teams will fancy their chances of going through, and that's the good thing about this weekend.
Yeah, it's actually they're very like, I think they'll be all great games this weekend and the following weekend, because the teams will be so well matched. Yeah, I think this will be a good open game. All the games Monaghan have been involved in, they've been quite high scoring, entertaining games and so on. And I think if it's a more open game like that, I think it'll suit Monaghan, and I just think they'll score more than Kildare. They've probably just more firepower and better players all over the field, and better players maybe to come in off the bench as well. They're bringing the Hugheses off the bench, McManus off the bench, and so on. Like, that's great experience to have in these type of games. And they're still doing well when they come in. So yeah, that's why probably shaded Monaghan for me as well.
Does it feel like this one last push for Monaghan, maybe at a few of those players you mentioned, Conor McManus, Darren and Kieran Hughes, like stalwarts for Monaghan over, the last 10 to 15 years? Does it feel like maybe this could be just this last push, maybe to get something out of this year?
Yeah, and I suppose Vinnie Corey being coming in as manager, he would have played with them. He's very well got up there, so I'd imagine that they're really a tight knit bunch. They're a team over the last 10 or 12 years that a lot of players play on very late for them. They seem to me like they're a very, very tight bunch. Like Colm mentioned it there, that they stayed up in the last day of the season, but they've done that so many years. Everyone thinks they're gone, and they're not in with a chance, and they come up with the goods. That's why I think they're an experienced bunch. They will, like we mentioned, Cork see it as a chance, Kildare see it as a chance, but I think Monaghan will as well, and they're the ones that I think, because of their experience, could deliver that. I'm not sure Cork or Kildare will do that, because they haven't done it in the past realistically, whereas Monaghan have, and look, a free shot for them to get to a quarter-final too.
And do you know what, Cathal, if they did actually beat Kildare, they're the type of team that would give one of the top seeds trouble in the quarter-final. Like, you wouldn't be surprised if they went up and put in a huge performance against Dublin or Kerry or something like that, besides Kildare going to
which they've done traditionally.
Yeah,
they've done that traditionally as well. Like, they could cause serious trouble for one of the seeded teams in the quarterfinal, because they have that quality. Like, they have a lot of good younger players coming through for a long number of years as well. So I just fancy them for this one.
So, but 2 Monaghan votes, is it?
Yeah.
So we'll go on to the last game of the day, Donegal-Tyrone. I suppose these two teams, it feels like they play each other maybe 2 or 3 times a year between league and Ulster Championship. Like, they know each other inside out. Now, we mentioned home advantage maybe doesn't count for a loss in Salt Hill, but it feels like Donegal are rarely bet in Championship up in Ballybuffet, whether it be league or Championship. You really have to earn a win there. I don't know, Cathal, have you played there? Colm, you probably have played there, a few times. Like, it's kind of one of those. Even the tunnel is a bit narrow going into the dressing rooms. It kind of doesn't look like the greatest ground in the world.
It's probably, I'm sure you played there, Cathal. It's probably the longest walk from the dressing rooms to the pitch in the country. It's about a mile of a walk. By the time you get there, you nearly turn around to go back out for the second half. But they have a great record there. Was it Armagh that took down the huge? I can't remember how many years it was, but Armagh went there last year there in the championship then and bet them. So they do. And you would be thinking the Donegal supporters are really going to come out now in force, because especially the way they've seemed to improve. Even the first day out against Derry in the group format, I thought they were really, really good. I know Derry kind of win that game pulling up, but I thought Donegal, I was really, really impressed with them that day. Even after the performance against Clare, which wasn't great, but the last day, like I mentioned when we're talking about Monaghan there, some of Donegal's scores in the first half were absolutely outstanding, of a top nature, like Conor O'Donnell, Kieran Thompson, Darragh Boyle. Like, they were absolutely just firing over scores and looked like a team playing a huge confidence. So, this is such a hard game to call, because how good are Tyrone? We've 18 months now we've been waiting for Tyrone to kick into gear, and it doesn't seem to be happening. And like the one thing I'd say about Tyrone is like when myself and Carl were playing against Tyrone, they were horrible to play against. Like they were physically horrible to play against. This Tyrone team looks like quite a nice bunch of boys to play against. You know what I mean? And I don't know will Donegal will be fearing Tyrone whatsoever on Sunday. And if I'd said that a couple of months, or if someone said that to me a couple of months ago, I would have thought they were mad. You know what I mean? So this is another opening game. You probably would think on Tyrone, if they bring their A game with the form Darna Canavan is in, might have enough for them. But I think this is a brilliant game for Donegal. And if they do win it, it's almost the story of the championship, really, from where they've come from, the turmoil they were in there during the league, and even at the start of the championship, to go and get to an All-Ireland quarter-final. Like, it would be some achievement, to be fair.
Yeah, it'd be massive, because they actually played Roscommon in the Hyde in the last game of the league, and they were so bad it wasn't even funny. Like, you know, like it was like a bad A versus B game, so it was like. And it was I can't remember what the score was, but it was pitiful to see it in terms of, you know, the players that they had out on the field and the place they were in at the time. But the one thing, looking out in the field, you were saying, like, there is more in that team. They have really good quality players there, and slowly but surely throughout the championship, they seem to be starting to get it back together. And that win last weekend against Monaghan, who were, you know, they're a solid team to win it. And they won it fairly convincingly. You know, they were 5 points up. I think I know Monaghan got a couple of points near the end, but like, it'll be as Colm said there, it'll be a huge achievement for them to get to a quarter-final. And I suppose the other thing with Tyrone, like, they are very inconsistent. Like, it was down to that free at the end, and they could have been gone, and Westmeath could have been up. And that was a very close one near the end. But again, they let Westmeath back into that game quite easily there. So I can't look at bar they just kick into gear this Saturday evening. I don't think Tyrone are going to be in the championship for a whole pile more, 1, possibly 2 weeks more, but I just don't see it in them, you know.
Colm, was there even an argument, even just the Michael Murphy nearly hangover? Like, he was such a pivotal person, not even in that team, but I suppose Donegal GA, you know, he represented everything that was about, you know, Donegal. Like, even just a personality like him out of the team. Then you had the Paddy McBrearty injury. You remember Ryan McHugh's gone as well. Yeah. Like, those 3 or 4 players that were taken out of that team for the league. Now, some of the performances were still not good enough and below the standard that probably they set. But you're losing those sort of players is going to rock any sort of camp.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's going to take a bit of time. But realistically, over the last couple of years, I thought Donegal were probably underperforming anyway. Yes. And it just hit an all-time low, really, this year with everything that went on during the league. Murphy's gone, McBrearty's gone, your captain. You mentioned Ryan McHugh as well. 3 huge losses. Niall O'Donnell didn't come back on the panel this year, and I think they were down a couple of players in with injury and whatnot. So that's all going to take its toll, of course. And when things are not going well, they can just spiral out of control. And that's what seemed to happen, really. You had the whole issues with the county board and Carl Lacey going on at the same time as well. So they've done pretty well, but you'd have to, in fairness, give huge credit to Paddy Bradley and Aidan O'Rourke, in fairness, to steady the ship. And not just to steady the ship, like, they are playing some really, really good football. And the main thing I was impressed was that day against Derry was they didn't just sit back and put 15 bodies behind the ball and try and frustrate Derry. They actually had a go at them. And I know they lose the game by 7 or 8, but they played some really good football that day as well. And I think that's given them a bit of confidence, and they brought that forward in the last couple of games. And like Saturday evening there, literally anything could happen. You feel for Donegal, they need to get out of the blocks early, make a good start, bring that form they brought over the last couple of weeks into this game, and put Tyrone under real pressure, because Tyrone aren't playing well. And if they do put them under that pressure, the crowd, like we spoke about earlier on, you'll be thinking it's going to be a huge Donegal crowd. You know, they will get behind them and build a bit of momentum and a bit of confidence, and that just might be enough that they need to get them over the line.
I suppose from Tyrone's point of view, is like probably the one big positive this year is probably Derek Canavan has probably come of age. You know, in the last few games, you know, he was really good against Monaghan in the Ulster Championship, good against Armagh, and you know, he kicked 10 points. He probably single-handedly kept Tyrone in the championship last weekend. So the over-reliance of probably McCurry and McShane for scores over the years to have, Derek Hanavan really step up now and show that class, because he's a serious operator.
Yeah, he's class. Like, I suppose at his age, to be kicking 10 points last weekend is class. Peter Hart was very good last weekend. McCurry didn't play. Like, they're probably over relying on them, and they're just not getting enough out of their other big players. Like, it's only a couple of years ago since all these won in All Ireland. Like, it's hard to believe that we're talking here about them possibly not getting through a pre-quarter final against a Donegal team who've had the year that they've had. But I suppose if they do click into gear, or any number of them players do click into gear next Sunday, I think that'll be Donegal.
Yeah, I call him on the Donegal side. You probably you lose Michael Murphy, but Oisin Gallen as well. The last couple of games, we always probably knew he had the talent, and he was in and out off the bench and with injuries. But he seems to really have been thriving and nearly taking the responsibility on, even with Mark Brearty not there. So from their point of view, to have the likes of him firing is massive for them going into this game.
Oh, yeah. And first of all, he looks fit, which is obviously a key thing. Obviously, he seemed to be over his injuries. He's got himself into decent nick. But what I said earlier on, the way Donegal are playing, the way they're moving the ball, I think that's really, really suiting him, because I'd say playing for Donegal over the last couple of years as an inside man, like, you would be pulling your hair up, because it was physically, they get the ball in the back line, they'd almost walk the ball out of the fence, soul on the ball, fist passing it over and back, and they never looked like they were ever getting their heads up and kicking the ball or looking to see was the man running inside. So to me, it just seems like they're moving the ball an awful lot quicker, and I think he's got 4 or 5 marks in the last couple of games as well, and that just shows that they're moving the ball, they're finding him with kicks into space, and he certainly seems to be benefit from it. He'll have a huge task the next day, probably McNamee, and go on him right from the start. So that'll be a great battle. And if he can win that battle for his team, really getting top there, I think that'll automatically give the rest of his teammates a big boost.
Carl, I mean, just even Tyrone again, is there an argument to say that there's more pressure on Tyrone in this game, that they're coming into this championship, realistically, everyone had written off Donegal? You could say they're even in bonus territory now. They won't be probably saying that. They'll be definitely targeting a win here, but you'd have to think, it's massive pressure on Tyrone going into this game.
Yeah, it's huge. And I suppose, look, they just have been underperforming. Like, you go through their team, Hampsey, Kilpatrick, Kennedy, Canavans, Matty Donnelly, Morgan, all them players, like, there's such quality overall, and they're just not performing for whatever reason. And as Colm mentioned earlier, it's not just in the championship; it's been going back to the league and last year as well. And everyone's just waiting for them to kick into gear. And I'm sure they're rattling their brains as to why it's happening like that. And it's not coming right for them at all. But again, if they could use this as a springboard, they're probably the one team coming through the pre-quarter finals. If you look at them all, that if they got through and put in a good performance, the teams waiting in the quarter final wouldn't like to see them coming. Because they're probably the team with the most improvement left in the championship. If they could kick on, you could see them going quarter final, semi-final, final. Like, you definitely wouldn't bet against that happening. But it'll take they'll have to improve a lot from what they've done over the last 3 or 4 weeks for anything like that to happen. But it's in them.
In terms of predictions, Colm, do you want to start with this one?
It's such a funny game, because part of me is thinking Tyrone could go up there and win this by 5 or 6. You know what I mean? If they really kick into gear, but there's just something telling me that Donegal are going to pull this one off. The famous word we love in the GAA is momentum, and maybe they just have a bit of that coming in over the last couple of weeks. And I go back to the home crowd again. If they can make a good start, get out of the blocks, put Tyrone under pressure, you could be looking at a great evening up there in Ballybofey, and you could be looking at a cracking game too. So maybe, I'll go for a home win on this one.
Yeah, Cathal?
I'm just going to go with Tyrone. I just think, pound for pound, I think they just have more quality on the field if they deliver. And I agree with Colm. They could win it. They could win it by a bit if they did click into gear. But realistically up there, it'll probably be a tight one. But I'll shade it for Tyrone.
Yeah, I suppose lastly, there's the 4 teams there: Kerry, Derry, Armagh, and Dublin waiting in the wings. Now it's suppose we won't know how teams come out of this weekend and head into quarterfinal weekend, but how big a factor will this break be? But from the last group game to the quarterfinal for those teams, they can sit back and relax. Or is there an argument to say, I know there's a lot of games at the legs, that whoever wins this weekend is coming in with serious momentum heading into next weekend? I don't know, which way would you look at it?
I think it depends on the team. Like Dublin, if you take Dublin as a point of example, like Dublin somehow, despite all this and the new format, bar the Roscommon game, they've cruised into a quarter-final. I think if you take the Roscommon game out of it, their last 3 games in the championship, including the Leinster final, they've won by excess of 50 points, which is absolutely nuts. So a team like Carl mentioned there, a Tyrone, a Monaghan, a Galway or Mayo, if they get Dublin in a quarter-final, it actually might be the time to get them, because they still might be, despite this new format, slightly undercooked and slightly unsure where they are. So you could be looking at a cracking couple of games down the line there in the quarterfinal. Whether this is an advantage or a disadvantage the week on or the week off, we're probably only going to know really when the quarterfinals are done, and you can fully assess who came through with injuries, who came through with a bit of momentum. But for the likes of, I'm going to go back to Mayo and Galway again, the winner of that game, like the confidence the winner of that game will bring into the following weekend. They believe, like Mayo believe, well, if you can go to Salt Hill and beat Galway, then you can go up to Croke Park and beat the 4 teams that's left as top seeds. And Galway will be thinking the same thing. And there'll be loads of teams coming from this weekend thinking they can give them 4 teams major bother. So it'll probably be only really from when these games are done, we'll get a full appreciation of what the advantage or disadvantage of it is.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things that I think Derry and Armagh will be damn glad at the week off. Yeah. They've had a tough grueling. Yeah. They both were in Division 1. They were scraping to get up and try and stay up in Armagh's case, and then the Ulster Championship was tough, and the group games they were pushing all the time there. Whereas look at Kerry and Dublin, have been tipping away, I would say, throughout most of the year. Like, so Colm's point there is right in terms of possibly a small bit undercooked, but it probably depends. You won't know that till Saturday or Sunday evening when the games are over. It'll probably depend on the manner that the team wins it. If a team
extra time as well, Carl, extra time penalties.
Yeah,
you just don't know.
Make a big factor. If a team goes out and wins a game comfortably by 5 or 6 points, versus if they had a 6 or 7 point lead and just hang on to a game, even that for the next day can make a huge difference. So it'll probably be case by case. But look at a Galway, Mayo, or a Tyrone coming through, if they were to win games this weekend, going through to a quarter final because they have the quality, momentum would be a huge thing then going in. Galway or Mayo going playing a Derry or an Armagh, they would see that as a huge opportunity to get through to a semi-final.
Brilliant, lads. Thanks very much for coming on. Hopefully we have some cracking games this weekend and Roscommon win. I'm not going to say a Mayo or Galway win. I'm going to sit on the fence with that one, but hopefully some exciting games regardless. So thanks for coming on, lads.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, lads.
Perfect, lads.
All right.